Hey, I got a great question from a viewer about how to help the body increase its ability to produce more hydrochloric acid or stomach acid on its own naturally. So in this video, I'm going to help you understand what the body needs to make that happen. And if you've tried some of these things and it didn't work, I'm going to help you understand why and steps you can take to turn it around. Let's go.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So it was over on our video for 4 steps to fix low stomach acid, where a user can or something like that said, I am sure that I have low stomach acid and I took betaine HCL, which made me feel better. After almost 2 weeks, I had enough stomach acid and I stopped taking betaine HCL. I felt good for 2 to 3 days, then I had low stomach acid again. I don't want to supplement HCL my whole life. I want my stomach to produce the acid itself. I cannot take ACV as the doctor said that my stomach lining is slightly inflamed and vinegar causes irritation. What can I do? Now remember, I'm not a doctor and I don't know can or whoever this is, and I couldn't possibly give them medical advice because I don't know their situation. I don't know what would be right for them. But we can talk about some of these things in some generalities. The first thing to understand is that a lot of people will use betaine HCL to help acidify the stomach when they're not producing enough stomach acid. So betaine HCL is just a supplemental form of basically stomach acid. It's basically what your body would produce to help acidify that stomach so that we can break our food down correctly and get the nutrients out of that food. And a lot of people see success. We talk about using this a lot. I talk about it in my books and courses. And it's very common for people to see major improvements to specific issues when they supplement with betaine HCL. But Can was saying like, hey, I did it for 2 weeks and it didn't work anymore. So we need to understand what we're actually doing. If somebody was using betaine HCL for 2 weeks and they felt better, they didn't have enough stomach acid. They were synthesizing enough stomach acid. They were creating that stomach acid by supplying it to the body. So that's not really doing anything to fix the actual cause. Now what we want to understand is, why do some people take betaine HCL for a while, improve their digestion, and no longer need it anymore? So we want to look at what the requirements are for the body to be able to make its own HCL. Because in a lot of cases, the reason a person can't make enough HCL is because the body doesn't have the minerals and nutrients that it needs to produce the HCL. But a lot of times that's the case because they're not breaking down their food well enough to get those nutrients and minerals out of their food. So what we do is we synthesize this digestion. We help the body access these nutrients by breaking down the food the way the body should be able to break down food. And now the body has what it needs to be able to start producing this HCL. But not very many people are going to do this in 2 weeks. So you really might have to move away from this mindset of, I'll do something for 2 weeks, I guess. I'll put effort in for 2 weeks, and that's probably about what I'm willing to do. A lot of people need to put effort in a lot longer than that. But the great news is that you can. You can put the effort in, and a lot of people can really improve a wide variety of significant health issues, which is amazing news because a lot of people suffer for years or decades with significant digestive issues. It took me 8 years just to get my voice back and to be able to talk like a human being. So you don't think I would have been willing to put in effort for more than 2 weeks if I knew what to do back then? Yeah, I really would have. So we hear from people every single day that have fixed significant health issues that they've been dealing with for years or decades because they started to learn how to work with the body instead of against it. So when we're looking at this issue of what does the body need, one important mineral that we know for sure is zinc. The body needs zinc to be able to make this hydrochloric acid, stomach acid stuff. And zinc is also used for a wide variety of other issues in the body and a lot of other functions in the body. It's very important to our immune system to function correctly. So if somebody gets really sick or they get some kind of cold or some kind of popular cold kind of situation that really depletes all of our zinc, now the body might not have what it needs to produce that hydrochloric acid. And then during that period, remember that now digestion is not working correctly. So now the body is bringing in less nutrients. So they've used up all this zinc, but they don't really have a way to keep bringing in more, and the person can get kind of stuck in a cycle of broken digestion for a long time. So if a person wanted to supplement with some zinc to make sure their body had enough to use all these functions that it needs to use zinc for and have enough to also make hydrochloric acid, zinc picolinate seems to be the best form of zinc to be able to make that happen. And we also use this digestive enzyme called digestazyme from Empirical Labs because it has a little bit of zinc and some other cofactors in there to give the body tools it needs to be able to make more of its own hydrochloric acid. So we use this with our clients just in an effort to say, oh, if you use this, you should be able to help your body start making more of its own HCl, and that will reduce the length of time that you might have to supplement with the betaine HCl on your own. But just so you know, it's always more than 2 weeks. I've never seen anybody fix their digestive woes just by using HCl for 2 weeks. Most people are going to need to do that longer than that. So with some clients, I might have them supplement with some zinc picolinate. Some, if they're using the digestazyme, I don't worry about it because they're already getting some. Most people don't need a lot, and taking too much zinc can be problematic. So, you know, just using like 1 capsule a day is usually enough just to give the body what it needs so that it has those resources available. And I'll put a link in the description below for that digestazyme just so you can check it out. I'm not telling you you need to use that or that that's going to fix all your problems, but I know you're going to ask and you want to see the ingredients, so I'll make that available in the description below. But supplementing with some zinc can be helpful for some people. The body also needs the chloride ion, and a lot of people run in horror from salt because the doctor told their Uncle Bill it was going to kill them, so they think, salt's not very healthy. But the salt has a lot of minerals in it that we really need, especially if you're using an unrefined salt, you know, some type of sea salt or some type of mined salt. It's an unrefined salt, has a lot of these trace minerals and other cofactors that the body can really use, but the chloride ion in there is very important. So if you're avoiding salt, using some salt can really help the body get the resources it needs to make hydrochloric acid. And the body also uses hydrogen and CO2, and CO2 is just carbon dioxide. That's what we exhale when we breathe. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. Some people say that the body needs vitamin B1 to make hydrochloric acid, or thiamine. And some people also say it needs iodine. And I don't see a whole lot of evidence to back those things up. And I think that some of those things have to do with the fact that they look at these studies like, oh, this person has hypochlorhydria or low stomach acid, and they also have low B1 or low iodine. And a lot of times it's just because they're not digesting their food well enough to bring these nutrients in. And supplementing with some B1, I don't have a problem with that. You know, that has other benefits as well. But if I have a client supplementing with some type of B vitamin, I also like to see them do like a B complex, like maybe even just once a week, because there's a lot of cofactors in a B complex that help the body use specific B vitamins a little bit more effectively. So that could be a step that a person would take. I don't have a problem with supplementing with iodine either. There's benefits from iodine as long as somebody isn't taking crazy high doses. But so I feel like these things are beneficial, but I don't use those steps with my clients. And I've helped a lot of clients fix their low stomach acid issues. So I don't feel like these things are as necessary as making sure the body has zinc and the chloride ion. But we'll talk about one possible benefit from B1 here in just a second when we talk about this next part, which is facilitation. So a lot of people are like, oh, I just want my body to make stomach acid. What do I need to take? And they just view it like it's a supply and demand issue. We got a problem, we're just going to throw some money at it. But with the human body, it's not always just about supply and demand. Sometimes it's about facilitation, which means we need to help the body have the ability to produce that hydrochloric acid. So one thing that's important to understand about this CO2 that the body needs to be able to make hydrochloric acid is to understand the Bohr effect. And we all learned about this in the 8th grade, and then we just kind of never talked about it again. But this helps us understand that the pH of the blood has a very narrow range that it has to stay within, or we just kind of die. And if the blood leans a little bit too far on that alkaline side, then what's called the Bohr effect kicks in. And that tells us that oxygen can't get down to the tissues where it needs to be utilized correctly, and it kind of gets stuck in the bloodstream. So what the body does is it will slow the rate at which we breathe in an effort to hold on to more of that CO2. We dispel CO2 when we exhale. CO2 is acidic. So the body's going to say, I'm just going to slow the rate at which I'm breathing so that I can hold on to more CO2. acidify that blood a little bit so I can balance out that pH and now allow oxygen to get down to the tissues where it needs to be utilized correctly. Oxygen is kind of a big deal to the body, so it wants that to be able to work, and it has this backup plan of adjusting the rate at which we breathe to help make that happen. But the problem is, if the body is wanting to hold on to CO2 a lot to help acidify that blood, then that might leave less CO2 available for the production of hydrochloric acid. It's probably going to view this balancing out of the pH of the blood as a priority over acidifying our food correctly. And with a lot of people, the priority may be, hey, my priority is I want to fix this digestive symptom that I'm having. But that doesn't mean that that's the body's priority. The body might have more important things going on. Maybe there's some type of overgrowth, or maybe there's some type of chronic infection in the body, and the immune system is going crazy using up all this zinc, dealing with this invader. And as a human, we don't know that the body can't make hydrochloric acid because it doesn't have enough zinc. It has other priorities. It's putting it towards getting rid of this invader than something that we want the body to do. So we have to understand that our priorities may be different from the body's. Same with this CO2 situation. So the problem is, a lot of people will produce less CO2 because CO2 is a byproduct of processing carbohydrates correctly. So when we eat carbohydrates and we process them correctly, the byproduct is CO2. So if someone is on like a ketogenic diet or a carnivore zero carbohydrate diet, they would likely be producing less CO2. And I'm not saying that those diets are wrong. They're beneficial in a lot of circumstances. We use those diets with a lot of our clients. I use them sometime. But we have to understand how they're affecting our body chemistry to know if they're right for us during that circumstance. So if a person is bringing in less carbohydrates, or if a person is leaning more insulin resistant, then they won't be able to process those carbohydrates correctly. Remember, it's not just eating carbs, it's processing the carbohydrates that produces that CO2. So that's one thing that could be going on with this B1. It kind of has the ability to help us with carbohydrate metabolism and energy production. And if the body can't really produce energy correctly, then some of those energies that would have gone towards this digestive process might need to be used in other areas. The digestive process takes more resources than just about anything that we do. So that might be a benefit that B1 has going on there. But if CO2 is low, this is a problem. So what a person can do is they can just look at their breath rate. And this is easy to do. You just set the timer on your phone for 60 seconds and you just try to relax, breathe normal, and count the number of inhales that you take in a minute. Not inhale 1 and exhale 2, just count the inhales. And if those breaths are less than 12 per minute, then that can be a sign that the blood is leaning a little bit too far on that alkaline side, and you might need to take steps to improve that scenario. We'll put a link in the description below for our video on how to improve oxygen utilization if you find that your breath rate is too low, because that's going to be an important step. Giving the body the things that it needs to be able to create hydrochloric acid isn't really going to do anything if a person doesn't have enough CO2 for the body to make hydrochloric acid. Sometimes we have to help this facilitation a little bit. If a person is dealing with gastritis issues, that can kind of damage these parietal cells that really produce our hydrochloric acid in that stomach lining. And I think the user here was saying, my doctor says I can't use apple cider vinegar because my stomach lining is inflamed. And we know now that when people have inflammation in the stomach, whether that be gastritis or ulcers or just inflammation, that it's usually caused by some type of bacterial overgrowth in the stomach. It's not caused by too much stomach acid like we thought back in the 80s. There's some type of invader in there that's creating this inflammation. And interestingly enough, a lot of times those invaders get in and set up camp because there wasn't enough stomach acid to fry them as they came in on the food that we're eating. So that stomach acid is the barrier to the whole body. So if someone has gastritis issues, they may need to improve that. And our user here was saying that they're not allowed to use ACV because they have this inflammation. And really, apple cider vinegar has the ability to magnify inflammation and create like some burning pain in the stomach if there's an ulcer or some type of gastritis situation. But so does betaine HCL capsules, and usually even more. So that kind of makes me think that a person might not have been using enough HCL if they have gastritis or some type of inflammation in the stomach, but they were taking HCL. If there's a bacterial overgrowth here in the stomach, they'll put out a lot of alkaline byproducts. And that alkaline byproducts will neutralize the acid in the stomach and make it even more alkaline and more hospitable of an environment for them to live, thrive in. So a lot of times when we put a little bit of HCl in there, it'll get neutralized and then it's not really doing the job that it's supposed to do. So if someone has gastritis and they can take HCl, they probably have something neutralizing HCl. If there's real gastritis and a person puts in enough HCl to actually acidify their food, they're probably going to have discomfort because it's like, acid on an open wound kind of thing. That would burn and that would create discomfort. So a person needs to take steps to improve any inflammation in the stomach before they really qualify to supplement with betaine HCl. And we'll put a link in the description below for our video on gastritis, a different viewpoint. I'm not going to go into all of that in this video, but you can check that out if that's a problem for you because this needs to be repaired. But a lot of people feel like these cells really can be healed and repaired once you remove the problem that's creating that inflammation. I'll put some links to a study in the description below that kind of talks about this if you want to dig into that a little bit more. But if a person has been feeling better using betaine HCl and they stop, they can continue to feel better for a few days depending on what improvements they created. If they were acidifying that stomach and making it harder for bacteria to replicate, they'll feel great for a few days until it starts to become less acidic and they start to replicate more and more. But in the situations where a person doesn't continue to feel good, we understand that they didn't really fix the problem, they were just synthesizing better digestion and more steps need to be taken to actually fix the underlying causes. So another major problem that we see is a problem with an electrolyte deficiency. And that's usually where the person doesn't have the minerals and some of these nutrients needed to give the body what it needs to make hydrochloric acid. But a person can look at this at home with just like a blood pressure cuff that you pick up like at a pharmacy for $30 or $40. And if your resting systolic blood pressure, which is that top blood pressure number, is below 112, that's a strong sign that a person does not have enough minerals and nutrients in the system. And this is not a diagnostic thing, but it's just giving you a sign of how the body could be operating. And this is usually the case because a person can't digest their food well enough to get all the minerals out of their food. So this is a common problem that we see, but if a person just looks at their blood pressure and it's like 98/60, well, now the inability to produce stomach acid, it makes sense. So now they can take steps to improve that scenario. And if you don't know how to do these steps, if you're new to this channel and you don't know how to look at your digestion to see what could be going wrong or understand if you might be dealing with an imbalance like an electrolyte deficiency imbalance, then I'll put a link in the description below to our totally free digestion course that kind of walks you through figuring those things out. And that course is totally free and that'll help you to understand these things a little bit more. And this is important to understand with this other issue too, which is a sympathetic dominance issue. And our autonomic nervous system kind of runs a lot of the show behind the curtains. And there's a sympathetic fight or flight state and a parasympathetic rest and digest state. And both of those states are great. The body needs both of them, but it'll move back and forth depending on the circumstance that it's presented with. So when we're in a stress situation, we're being chased by a lion, the body will move into this state and it will change the way that it's operating to optimize for survival. So it changes how we're functioning to help us get away from this lion in that emergency. But in the world we live in today, we're stressed because it's traffic or a boss is a jerk and all these other reasons that are really not about survival. But the body doesn't know that and it's still adjusting how the body's operating to optimize for survival. So when we're stressed all the time, it can really push the body into this sympathetic fight or flight state most of the time, and then the body can't move into the parasympathetic rest and digest state that it needs to be in to be able to produce that hydrochloric acid. So a person could have all the nutrients that they need, they could have enough CO2, they could have enough minerals and everything, but if they're really stressed, they still can't produce enough hydrochloric acid. That's why people always say, try to relax. Don't read your emails and things like this and do work while you're eating. Try to relax and be calm so you can digest your food better. Well, this is why. The body can't make hydrochloric acid when it's stuck in that sympathetic state. So that free course that I was telling you about can also show you a simple test that you can run at home with tools you pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store to get an idea if are you leaning too far on that sympathetic side. Because if you are, that's something that has to be repaired or you're not going to be able to produce this hydrochloric acid on your own and you will have to use the betaine HCl indefinitely. So understand this though. Would that be the worst scenario? I don't think it should be your goal. Your goal should be to no longer need betaine HCl. When we're working with people, our goal is to help them correct malfunctions so their body works the way that it's supposed to work. But if you have this big puzzle of things going wrong that takes time to figure out, like I had 6 or 7 different things going wrong when I couldn't talk, and I had to fix a few layers of things before my voice started to come back. So that might take some effort for somebody, and they might need to supplement with betaine HCl and maybe even other things to help the body work correctly while they're working on this puzzle. And remember, you could do all these things, but if there's some type of bacterial overgrowth in the stomach, neutralizing the acids that are being produced, then you're still not going to be able to digest that food the way that you're supposed to. And finally, with videos like this, I always hear somebody that's like, oh, well, I'm blood type A, so I don't make any hydrochloric acid, so I just have to suffer and I can only eat carbs and that kind of stuff. And I just don't buy into this. I know there's a lot of documented, studies and things that point towards this situation, but I think a lot of times these people kind of gravitate towards carbs. And remember, the body will produce more hydrochloric acid depending on the amount of protein that we're consuming. So if we're consuming less protein, then the body will also produce less hydrochloric acid. And also the folks who believe this, that the type A people, blood types, make less hydrochloric acid, also feel that these people kind of fly off the handle to stress situations a little bit more. So maybe they are predisposed to be leaning more on that sympathetic side, which we understand makes it harder for the body to produce that hydrochloric acid. So I just don't like people to view it like, oh, well, this is my genetics, so I'm just stuck that way. I don't view that's the situation in hardly any situations. I have genetic situations. I have an iron overload situation, but that doesn't mean that I have to die like I should have done 10, 15 years ago when my iron levels were through the roof. I took steps to correct the situation. I think with most circumstances, people can make adjustments to what they're doing in their life to improve things that are maybe leaning a little bit too far in one direction because of their genetics. But once a person goes through these steps and corrects any of these issues that are going on, and they make sure they don't have a bacterial overgrowth, they've taken steps to reduce that issue if there's a problem there, then it becomes time, okay, what do I need to look at to understand when is it time to reduce and then stop supplementing with betaine HCl. So to understand those issues, you can jump over right now and check out our video on how do I know when to stop supplementing with HCl. I can't wait to hear about your results.